I have recently started a new job where I accommodate families in viewings and funerals at the Loudon Park Funeral Home. I have learned about this profession through an acquaintance of mine who has been studying mortuary science at CCBC. When I first started, I was very interested about how a person or individual who works at the funeral service has to put the family's needs first, and they have to do this consistently through a day-to-day basis because the unfortunate matter of reality is that many people pass away and need to be accommodated for. The funeral service industry is usually seen through a very narrow perspective by a large majority of the public. This is because most of the reputation that the funeral home receives is either extremely negative because somebody made a mistake, or some sort of entertainment. The TV show 6 Feet Under.
You've done a nice job. She looks so peaceful.
Well, she is at peace now.
If there's any justice in the universe, she's shoveling shit in hell.
Excuse me.
Or social media such as Twitter or Facebook. Because of this, the general public does not understand what employees at a funeral home or employees in the funeral service profession do in their daily routine. Therefore, I have asked my general manager, Patrick Fleming, to inform individuals viewing this video. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Patrick Fleming, and I am a licensed mortician. I am currently the general manager at the locally owned Loudon Park Funeral Home.
What do you do?
As a mortician and general manager, my job is to take care of everything it takes in order to help a family when they've had a death, and that includes from the initial phone call to the final disposition, burial, or cremation. I do everything in between that. In addition to those responsibilities, I'm also the general manager, so I have business responsibilities as far as budgeting, accounting, human resources, ordering, things such as that, growing the opportunities for our funeral home to serve more families, in addition to, providing direct service to families.
Now I'm going to ask you the same question, but in 5 words.
I orchestrate, I facilitate, I plan, I provide care, and I authorize.
Why did you want to become a mortician?
Actually, I wanted to become a mortician because of what I experienced personally, and that occurred to me at a very young age. A lot of people come into funeral service later in life if they're not in the profession as far as their family being in the profession. I was 9 years old, and my uncle and aunt had a 12-year-old niece, my 12-year-old niece, their daughter. And my aunt was in the hospital at 38 years old with a very bad heart attack, and my uncle was preparing to take my cousin to school, and he had a heart attack, and he died. And I remember the chaos, I remember the confusion, I remember everything about that, and going to the funeral home and seeing, out of all that chaos, confusion, and grief, order, dignity, compassion, and a public venue in which the family and community could support the family that had a loss, and an opportunity for us to express our support.
How do most people learn about the funeral home, and what can you do to help people understand the reality behind things like social media or the news?
Oh, you mean about funeral service? Sure. Well, people encounter funeral service probably in 2 ways. They probably either are personally affected by having to plan or attend a funeral service for a loved one or a friend, or unfortunately they probably hear about some god-awful crazy funeral director doing something horrific that gets plastered all over social media, the news, 2020, 60 Minutes, magazines, publications, whatever. Those are the 2 things. And unfortunately, Both of those are negative. Someone's passed away and there's been something horrible done by a funeral director. So there's not a lot of great press for funeral service. And that's okay, because quite honestly, you should never leave talking about the funeral director, because that person's kind of invisible. But we get a black eye very easily because there's so many of us in this profession. And unfortunately, as in anything, people are people, and there are some unscrupulous funeral directors. And it's the unscrupulous ones that always seem to make the news.
So as a funeral director, how do you help the public perception of the funeral service?
You know, when I sit down with a family that I don't know, I have a very limited amount of time to convey to them that I'm trustworthy, I'm on their side, and I'm there to help. And that's an art form, because they do need to trust me, and they need to understand I'm there to help, and I am a professional, and I'm the expert, and that's what we do. And you do that by exceeding their expectations. You meet everything that they need, and you go above and beyond. And in doing that, you create, in a very short time, a very strong, lasting bond with them. You know, we are charged with their most sacred possession, their loved one, and they're putting all their trust in us, and we cannot let them down. We have to always be mindful of the sacred trust that families place in us, and conveying that to them will allow us to serve them better and let them know that we are indeed there to help them.
It is important for an individual to experience the funeral profession personally, instead through social media or the news. The reason that this is important is because the individual gets to experience the service personally and can understand how and why things happen at a viewing or at a funeral.